Welcome to the Strictly Free Game Podcast. I am Sean Waller, also known as Sean Your Realtor, whatever you want to call me. Just make sure you call me. That's my new intro.
I love that.
I'm here with royalty today. I'm gonna say royalty.
Aw,
she was in Dubai. She was getting busy. I'm here with Miss Sabine Franco.
Yes.
I say that right?
Yes.
Ambitious Legacy. Sabine, give me a little information.
Yeah, so I'm Sabine Franco. I'm an attorney. I run a law firm called the Ambitious Legacy Law Firm, and we focus primarily on estate planning, but we've, been in the industry for over 10 years, helping people create or protect the assets that they're putting in their legacy, like real estate, trademarks, copyrights, all that good stuff, and just, out here helping the community.
Which is dope.
Helping folks.
That's dope. That's dope. She's out here saving us, or teaching us, I should say.
Yeah.
Ambitious Legacy. What made you start? What made you go into the field of just estate? Because it's not just estate planning, but what made you go into that field of will and trust?
So, well, that's a great question. So like I said, I've been, running my business for a number of years, and I had come across a lot of people from the real estate arena, from like the business arena, who would come to me and tell me crazy stories, right? Like, properties that were meant for them that were left in someone else's name, or, their family member had assets, but they were not able to get a hold of it. I had this one lady who, she was actually manipulated by a family member to sign over a property that was left to her.
Wow,
right?
really?
Just because she didn't understand how it worked, right? Like I didn't know if I'm signing this deed that this is what this means.
Wow.
And so just a lot of things like that I was seeing. And then I just sort of had this desire to figure out, we're hearing a lot about this generational wealth, but people don't realize, you could build a wealth, and people have built wealth, right? Especially in Black and brown communities. But it's the generational piece. We're not passing it on. So at the time, now people are talking about it a lot, but at the time, there wasn't a lot of conversation about the vehicles to pass on your wealth. And that's what sort of got me excited to educate people, help people, and I found that it was a need. People are hungry for the information.
I like that you said that we're getting wealth, but we're not passing it down. That is a gem in itself, because I've seen it. I'm in real estate, so I hear those stories all the time. What is the difference? So let's break it down, because will and trust are two totally different things, right?
Yes.
What's the difference between the two?
So both of them are what you call testamentary documents. So they both allow you to say who you want your assets to go to if you pass away. With a will, it's more like instructions for the court to let the court know how they should distribute your assets. So that means their family, when you pass away, they need that original document to take to the court, to have the court put someone in place to pass on your assets. And there's a lot of sort of roadblocks that can come up with that. With a trust, it doesn't need that third party. It doesn't need the court's involvement, because within the document, you put who is going to be in control, and that person has the automatic right, once you pass away, to just step in and continue to control the assets.
So that was going to be my next question. So it sounds like the trust trumps the will?
Yeah, it's not so much that it trumps it. It's just that it makes it a lot easier to really, pass on wealth. And not only is it easier, but it also gives the family privacy, right? So you see when people pass away, you've seen it, everybody loses their mind, they go crazy, everybody wants to get something. So now when you have a will, it typically, the courts are going to inform everyone who could possibly benefit from the estate. Hey, does anybody want to contest this? Does anybody, have any interest? Does anybody have anything to say about this? But when it's a trust, it stays private. So only the people who are benefiting know about it, and know that there are assets. And it's a lot harder for people to commit fraud, which happens all the time, to sort of steal assets because it's owned by this trust, and unless you're the trustee, and you don't know who the trustee is, unless you're the trustee, you can't control those assets.
Wow, okay. See, I didn't know that. I'm glad you broke that down. So now when it comes to a trust, right? I'll go back to a will. So when it goes to a will, our community, we've heard of wills all the time. We hear wills, but when we hear the word trust, we think rich. We think only rich people can be trust fund babies.
That's true.
In a way, right?
Yeah.
So what would be the steps that someone would actually take to do both? Let's break it down. To do both entities in itself.
Yeah. And so just for clarity, like I'm not saying a will is bad. It's not bad, right? It's a great basis for an estate plan. And in fact, if you have a trust, you should still have a will to accompany it, because a will make sure that if your trust doesn't own something, that at least there's a way to get it to your trust or get it back to your estate, right?
Okay.
Whereas if you don't have that will, there's going to be a gap. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Because what happens is when you create a trust, your assets have to then be transferred to your trust.
Okay.
Right? So it's like starting a business, but if your business doesn't own the thing, whatever it is, your business can't have any control over that. So same thing with the trust. It has to own what you want it to control.
I like that. Okay.
Right? So the process is basically to figure out where do you fall.
Does one come before the other?
They can come simultaneously, or if you're starting off, say you don't have that much assets, or you just want to state like something simple like, I just want to say who's going to be the guardian of my kid, or something like that. You could start off with a will. Perfectly good way to start off your estate planning, right? But typically, if you're at the level already where you have some assets and you have some decisions that you need to make, you have a business or whatever, you can start with the trust right away, and you'll do your will and your trust at the same time.
Okay.
Right.
And I have a scenario for you, because it actually came up last night in the conversation.
Perfect.
So I was like, I'm asking this
Hopefully I know the answer.
And it's something similar to what you just addressed, right?
Okay.
So, all right, so someone has a child.
Uh-huh.
I'm bringing back.
Yeah.
Grandma.
Okay.
Right? She has 2 kids. Branched off. So now one kid is married, husband, kids. The other one is single with the child.
Okay.
She wants to put the single person as her beneficiary. Is that what you would call it?
Yeah, it could be depending on what it is. On what document?
On the
will. Okay.
On
yeah,
will.
Beneficiary.
But she wants, if something happens to the single one, because she has a child, she wants those assets to be able to be transferred to the child.
Okay.
What happens, God forbid something happens to the single one, and now the child dad is still around.
Okay.
What happens with those assets? Like, who's in control of that?
That's a really good question.
I told you I had something for you.
Yeah, so really, okay, if there is a will in place, and the will basically states that goes to the child's not around, goes to the kid. If the kid is still a minor, then the dad could be put in control over those assets. However, the court is going to evaluate dad to see, is he trustworthy? Is he responsible? Is he creditworthy? Because the court also wants to make sure, like, are these assets going to be around to care for the child? Now, they're not going to just give it to dad, but they might put him over it. So say it's an account, they'll have the account created for the kid, make sure that the monies go in there, and they might give dad control as guardian.
Okay,
right?
That's what I thought.
If it's real estate, that's a little bit more tricky, because they're not going to transfer it to dad. They're probably going to have it in some sort of a trust. Like the court might create a trust if there's a will and there's a child that is not of age, because they also want to make sure that they're not allowing these assets to just get lost or taken.
Taken is the key word.
Yeah.
Right? Because like you said, we've seen it.
We've seen it. But that being said, like, there could be fraud done. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a vulnerability.
So it automatically goes back to the court. It
would be in the court's discretion, I would say.
Okay.
Right? Because they didn't necessarily provide for that. Now, the grandma could write in her will, who does she want to be the person to be in charge of the child's assets if that scenario plays out.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So she could say that. But when there's small children involved, I think it makes more sense to create a trust, because of the fact that you have more control. Like, you can say as well, meaning you don't need the court to be involved to then decide to, figure out how to get these assets to this kid. You could just create the trust, put the asset in the trust, and say, hey, something happens to my daughter, then I want it to go to my grandkid. Whoever you put in charge is going to be like the trustee, the person who's responsible, and that person can sort of walk out those wishes.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. How do you avoid probate?
Avoiding probate, your trust is used to avoid probate. So when I said that when you have a will alone, you have to take that will to the court, and the court decides, that's the probate process.
Okay.
So that's where it takes time, it takes money, it's public, all that stuff is probate. So if you create a trust and you transfer the assets to the trust, like the properties or accounts, insurance, then you avoid probate, that whole probate process.
Okay. Now, can we talk about probate?
Yeah, sure.
Because we had a high-profile celebrity that recently had his estate had to go through a probate situation. The guy from I always messed up his name,
Chadwick Boseman.
Yes.
Yes.
So a situation like that, because we always think that the celebrities and the rich people have it figured out,
it.
right?
Right.
How can you break down his situation? Because you broke it down perfectly when you did your
my podcast,
your podcast on it.
So yeah, I spoke about it a few times, and I guess I'll give the iteration that I remember. So what happened with Chadwick is allegedly he did not have a trust or a will, right? And so because he did not have a trust or will, his estate had to go through the courts. Now, when you don't have a will, it's not called probate, it's an administration process, right? The estate needs to be administered. That's how it's kind of explained. So, but it's a similar process. Essentially, you got to go to court, file paperwork to basically say, hey, we are the loved ones that are around, and we're the ones who should benefit from the estate, so we want the court to make that happen, right? And so when you don't have a will, though, it makes it a little bit more complicated because, one, the court has to figure out who's the family, right? What evidence do you have that you're family? Is there anybody else? And then who's basically first in line? Okay. So the states, each state has their sort of way that they, I guess, hierarchy of how they distribute the assets. So they'll say if you're married, then it's going to be your spouse. If you are married and with children, it'll be your spouse and your children, right? And some states say just your spouse, some states say your spouse and your children. If you don't have a spouse, then it's your children. And then if you have no spouse, no children, then it's typically going to be your parents. Okay. Right. So in his case, he was
married, wasn't he?
He was married, yeah.
Okay.
In his case, he was married, and then there was a situation where there was like some sort of a dispute between the parents and the spouse, I believe.
I think so.
I think so. At some point down the line, right? So in his case, he was married, so it was supposed to be his wife to get everything. But he was sort of newly married. I think they kind of got married during the past couple of years where he was ill. So that was sort of the thing. Should his parents get? Should his wife get? You know, and things like that. Now, I also saw that he may have had a trust. And so the things that they were kind of arguing over were things that were not in his trust. I don't know that that's to be true because I haven't really seen a lot about it. But from what we know, a bulk of his estate did go through probate, and then his, I believe that his wife and his parents ended up sharing the estate, right? Yeah. And so part of it was that probably like almost $1 million bond had to be posted for his estate. So I think, So because his estate was probably like around $3 million or $4 million, about $1 million bond had to be posted. And what a bond is basically states, it's like an insurance policy. So the courts are like, okay, you're going to be over this estate, and there's all this money in this estate. We want to make sure that if something happens, that the loved ones could be made whole. Like whoever's in charge runs off with the money. There needs to be something to secure that. So that's what the bond is for. It's almost like bail bonds.
When I hear bond, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, everybody knows what I say. It's almost like bail bonds. They're like, oh, okay.
That's when we said bond, I'm like, oh, that's what I'm thinking.
So for people who don't have money, that could be a real problem. You know what I'm saying? Like to even get over that hurdle to even get access to the assets. You know what I mean?
Because even his estate was in probate for a while, right?
Yeah.
Like a year.
Yeah, it was at least a year. And that's not long.
Oh.
That's not long. So we had, what's this guy named? James Brown's estate was like 15 years.
I remember that.
Yeah, Prince's estate was like probably like 6 or 7 years. You know, like these.
But wasn't Prince's estate controversial because he had a will?
No, he had nothing.
Oh, I thought he had a will.
No, it was even more controversial because his survivors were his half siblings who he was rumored to be estranged from some or most of them. So they had to figure out who are your your relatives, and then what should they get.
Wow. See that, and that's where it gets tricky, right?
Yeah, that's where it gets tricky.
Especially our community, because we never, especially when we're married, because we always think that the spouse will get it.
Yeah.
They don't automatically go to the spouse, but like you said, if you have estranged family members
that
they feel that they should be entitled, then that's when everything is pretty jammed up.
Yeah. And people can, even if they're not entitled, they can prolong the process just by arguing with the court. You know what I'm saying? Wow. So just by saying, hey, I have an objection to this. This is a type of this is something that I want to raise. Maybe there was a will and it was lost, or somebody's holding up the will, or there's fraud going on. Like, they could raise all types of things. And when they do that, the court has to take it into consideration, and it drags out the process.
Wow. Now, what about, I'm gonna use my camera guy over here, Alex. Okay. So Alex is a single guy, right? 24 years old.
Okay.
Would it make sense for him to have a trust at this point? When does he start his process?
Okay, so once he turned 18, it would have been appropriate for him to have a healthcare proxy and power of attorney. That's if something happens to you health-wise or financially or legally, there's someone with authority to step in and care for you. Because once you're 18, parents can't help you. You're an adult, right? So that would have been appropriate. But as you get older, then you want, putting something more in place depends on what's going on in your life. So you have a kid, then you might want to get a will, at least to talk about guardianship, right? He has a business, right? So he should probably have a trust to, if the income from his business is going to continue past his life, then he might want to have a trust to direct what happens to that business. If it's not, then maybe you don't need a trust, right? But definitely having a business is one. Maybe once he gets a house, would be a reason. And or, other sort of investments that he wants to make sure, hey, if something happens to me, I want it to be passed on. Like, I've had clients in their 20s come in and get trusts because they own businesses and they have partners. And they want to make sure that if something happens to them, not only their family benefiting from their business, right, but also their partners are protected because their partners don't have to now fight with the family. They don't have to now, drain the business to pay somebody out. Like, there are provisions for that. So if you want to really get your stuff in order, especially being a business owner and having partners, you definitely want to think about
Never even thought about that.
Yeah.
I never even put that. That makes so much sense. I never even thought about that.
Yeah.
So get it together, bro. You got to get it together.
Right.
And now, what kind of assets? You kind of touched on it. If you could bring it back, what kind of assets? Because this is a question that somebody asked on my Instagram. Yeah. What assets could someone roll into their trust?
Pretty much anything, to be honest. Like, real estate, bank accounts, investment accounts. I would say, stocks and bonds are all that are investments. Art, jewelry, anything that's like an asset that you want to transfer over to someone else.
Okay. Do they count like NFTs and all of that stuff now as an asset?
Yeah, it's an asset. It's an asset. It's to make it even more broad. It's like really anything of value that you want to pass on, right? Yeah. So it's an asset, and we're dealing with that type of situation all the time. Like, people have, it's not as much of a hot conversation as it was a while ago, but you
don't hear about NFTs anymore. Right?
Yeah, it just sort of died down. I don't think they're gone. I think it's just that because the way that the market is, like, it's not so easy to make money like it was like just last year. So, I think it'll be back. But yeah, protecting NFTs, protecting your crypto, that's what I was thinking of. All those things are part of assets, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, you've been jet setting, right? You've been around. She's been around the world. She's been doing all types of amazing things. You've been on the road.
Yes.
How has that been for you? How's that been for business, right? Like,
it's been great.
Because you're pretty much new to this whole social media stuff for the most part, right?
I would say no, not like brand new, but for the past couple of years.
Okay.
Yeah. It's been really good. It's good. It's been good to allow me to really reach people, educate people. It's been good to elevate my presence in the industry and for people to sort of know who I am. But I think it's really been impactful for people to see a woman of color running her own business or, being an attorney and sort of doing all these things, sort of the opportunities and the possibilities that are out there for everyone.
Amazing.
I know it's impacted my daughter, and people that I know. So that's what I'm sort of grateful for. But for business, it's been great.
Good. No, because you can relate, right? If you see someone that looks like you, that we don't all hear those horror stories.
Yeah.
And every deal is probably not the cleanest when it comes to everything,
exactly.
because families are families. we have a connection. We have a few connections, but
Oh, really?
a big connection is Crystal Young.
Yes,
my girl Crystal.
my homie.
You guys have put like a coaching thing together, right?
Yes.
How's that going?
That
What
is going
exactly?
good. We're really getting it off the ground. It's a course because have done a lot of real estate transactions, and Crystal is the real estate queen. We already know that. So we put a course, putting our knowledge together, our over 30 years of experience we have between us in the real estate industry, to teach other lawyers how to practice real estate law.
That's
because
big.
Yeah, when we both of us can relate to coming into the industry, trying to figure it out. There's not a lot of people who look like us who are doing it the right way. Sorry to say, and it's just because just like a lot of other areas in the law, it's predominantly white, right? So we just wanted to not only bring the information, but bring it in a way that's relatable, that's understandable, and sort of cover all of the bases. There's nothing out there that's telling people like all of these different areas, all these different nuances in real estate law. And like there are tons of attorneys out there, but there are few that are great and that are doing things the right way. Right.
Very, very far between.
Right.
It's like you said, especially when it comes to us, because we're in this day and age now where we actually support each other.
Yeah, which is
really
lovely.
Yes. And people come straight out of law school probably don't have that mentorship, or you're learning on the fly. But when I saw you guys put out your program, I'm like, oh, this is super dope.
Thank you so much.
So that's ill. What is your richer than you think? I've been researching. I'm here.
Thank you. So that's my book that I put out earlier this year, pretty much recently, and it is to really just break down all of these concepts for people, because there's so much information on the internet. However, it's not all sort of concise, it's not all understandable, and people are still confused about how things work together. Like, what do they need? When do they need it? How should they be thinking about these things? And so I wanted to sort of fill that gap and break all of these things down. So I get into talking about legacy, talking about what does it mean to create a legacy, like making an impact. And then we talk about, the basics, like we talk about your wills, your trusts, your healthcare proxy, your power of attorney. I get into talking about LLCs and trademarks and all that good stuff, all in one book.
All in one book. All in one book.
All in one book, so that people could understand, like, these are building blocks, and they also can work together to help you build that legacy, that empire that you want.
Let's talk about trademarks. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, okay.
Because we're all, not we're all, but people out here operating with businesses, right?
Yeah.
But we haven't trademarked anything. People probably know what it is, but what is a trademark? Why is it important to trademark what you have?
Okay.
And how does that
play
into your legacy?
Yeah, okay, yeah. So a trademark is basically you protecting what we call intellectual property. So you've created something with your mind. This thing is a representation of your brand, either a service or a product that you're putting out there to the public. So the same way we recognize McDonald's from the arches or the name, or Nike, those are the type of things that you want to trademark so people know who you are. And typically it needs to be, unique so that you can get it protected. I got to put that out there.
Please put that out there.
But the reason why it's important is because, we're out here, we're creating things. We never know the value that things are going to have. And a trademark is typically one of the largest values associated to a business, because once people know you and they're coming to you, there's like equity in that, right? We call that goodwill. So that's like how you harness your goodwill. Okay. And when you protect that and you now own it, it's like a thing, right? You own it. Now it's something that you can leverage by maybe licensing it, by maybe selling that business, or whatever the case is. And from that trademark, you can continue to receive residual income over time, right? If you take advantage of that. And we just never know. Like, you can't say, oh, this is just a little business. It's not going to be. Everything started off as a little business.
That's true.
Right, And so once we protect that, and we can also have it as part of our estate plan, or part of the wealth that we're passing on, your family can then continue to leverage it, right? Because, the founder of McDonald's is not around, but, it's still being leveraged, right? So that's why it's important. It's an asset, it's something of value, and it can continue to create value and wealth for the person who's created it.
Have you ever seen the documentary on the guy? His name Ralph Ross. You remember the guy who used to make those paintings back in the days?
Oh yeah,
You ever seen the documentary on him?
No.
He didn't trademark anything.
Really?
So his family doesn't make any money off of any of that stuff.
Wow.
Yeah,
somebody must have trademarked his name.
Somebody trademarked. One of his partners did.
Oh wow.
Yeah, his partner and the wife did, and they're making money off of all of his stuff. His kids make nothing. Zero.
Dang, they should do the right thing.
They
really should do the right thing.
And he's still making him a lot of money off that stuff too.
Yeah, I'm sure they are. Like and that's the thing. Like we just don't know. And like artists and creators have been the ones taken advantage of the most because just having lack of knowledge. And I feel like everything that I've done has been to help people who don't know get the information and start doing the thing that they need to do to sort of protect what they have.
Of course, yeah.
And so here we are, with legacy planning.
No, listen, artists they just want to work, right? They don't want to think of the. No one wants to think of what happens.
The business
after
side, yeah.
I go.
I agree.
This was dope.
Thank you,
This is dope.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate
Great questions.
You was
like,
I was ready. I've been waiting for this one for a while. I do have some more questions though.
Sure.
You spoke on one of your podcasts, because like I said, I'm listening, about a mirror will.
Okay.
And that actually hit home for me.
Tell me about it.
So when my mom passed away.
Okay.
And my mother and she was married.
Sorry to hear that.
Thank you. But they were separated.
Okay.
Not legally divorced, but they were separated.
Okay.
Out of the house, all of that stuff.
Okay.
But she never had a chance to switch anything over.
Okay.
So everything pretty much went to him. The house, the life insurance, all of that stuff. So when I heard that, I was like, yo, this actually really resonates.
Yeah,
it hits home.
for sure.
So can you explain exactly, because I never even knew a mirror will was a thing. I didn't know that was.
Yeah, so sometimes people will, couples will go and do their estate plan together most of the time, right? And so they'll get, if they get wills done that say, hey, if I die, everything goes to you. If you die, everything goes to me. Or it might say, in addition to that, if I die, everything goes to you, and then if you pass away, it'll go to our children, or sometimes they have separate children. Right. Yep. So when you have that situation where you have separate children, you can't just leave it to that, right? Because it allows the other person to make changes that then does not benefit your kids who are not their kids. Because a good chance is if you pass away, if they weren't close in the first place, they're not going to have a relationship and things will be changed. So it's really important to think about long-term protecting children who are not of your current relationship or not of your current marriage, because it's a good chance they could get left out. So a trust would have been a better route to say, okay, I'm going to put whatever it is that I want my child to get in this trust. I can have my spouse benefit from it during their lifetime, but then once they pass, then it goes to my kid. Okay. So that way, you don't have to leave the spouse destitute either, but your kid ultimately benefits from your estate, that you created.
Makes sense.
And that happens a lot. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
In your mom's case, like switching over beneficiaries is like critical, right? Because when you separate from relationships, or someone passes away, you want to make sure that you update those beneficiary designations to be what you really want them to be currently. And that's why I say like your estate plan grows with you. So like when things change, you want to think about updating your plan, updating what's going to happen, especially.
I was about to ask that.
Yeah. Especially with like the beneficiary situation, when people leave jobs. When people start jobs, that's when they selected beneficiaries, and they never think about it ever again, right? They don't even know that it's a thing, right?
Yeah.
And so it's something that people need to know, that no, you need to go back and update that, because I'm sure if you started the job 20 years ago, things are different now, or they may have even left that job, never even think about that account.
That's true.
And it's still, not the way they want to go. So that's something that everybody could do for free for themselves.
This is basically calling HR or calling whoever the provider is and just switching the beneficiary.
Correct.
How often should someone switch? I know you said like every stage in life, but if you had to put like a timeline on it, right?
I say every 3 years.
Every 3 years?
Yeah, every 3 years, check, that it's the way that you want it to be, that it's going to the person you want it to be. And if it is, then you leave it. If not, you need to make a change.
And you don't need you don't need that other person to sign off. So say you have someone as your beneficiary. You don't need that person to sign off?
If you have like a retirement account, that's when you need like your spouse to sign off if you want to take them off of that, right?
Got it.
But anything else you don't need authority, right, to remove someone as your beneficiary because you're selecting that person.
Okay.
You know, I would say this though. Sometimes, like in divorce, like part of the agreement would be you have them as a beneficiary. You have to provide like a life insurance for them as a beneficiary. Sometimes that's part of like a divorce arrangement. So if you have an order, then yes, follow that order. But if you don't have an order, then you could do whatever you want.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. when I first met my wife, when we were dating, she was making me get life insurance and all. I'm like, what are you trying to kill me off? But she had that. Her parents put her onto that stuff early, so it helped us out in the long run.
Good.
So yeah, it's dope. Yeah. It's dope. What if someone was trying to start this whole process? What documents would they need up front? Like if they're trying to call a Sabine, probably won't get Sabine. You're gonna get Sabine. But if you're calling Ambitious Legacy, what documents should they have ready when they're making that phone call?
Okay, so they should have their property deeds. If they don't have the original, as long as they can access a copy like online or something like that. They should have their bank accounts, their I guess most recent statement, their investment accounts. Sometimes we need tax returns. Just depends if tax planning is going to be involved. Okay. And that's like the bulk of it. We want to see their insurance policies, things like that, to make sure that we're helping them. Either we want to plan for them correctly, or we're helping them to be able to like fund their trust or whatever their plan is. Okay. We want to make sure that it is what they say it is. Sometimes people think they have a thing and it's not necessarily that, or it's different than what they thought. So we want to make sure we verify those things.
Okay. All right, cool.
Not too hard.
That's not too hard.
Not too
that was painless.
These are things you have already,
You should have access to all that stuff.
You should have access,
All right, it's not too bad. Not too bad. All right, cool. I think that's it. I think I kind of like went rapid fire with everything. So I've been ending this podcast on a different note lately.
Okay, sure.
Because I'm a hip hop guy, right?
Okay.
I'm an 80s baby.
Right.
Raised on hip hop.
Right.
If there was one era in your life, right, that you could bottle up, that would define Sabine, right? It could be an artist, a song, any era, 80s, 90s, whatever it is.
That's hard, Sean.
I know it's something in there that you could it'll take you back in time that defines. Like, I hear that and that's the soundtrack to Sabine right there. What would that be?
A whole soundtrack?
It could be one song, artist, it could be
I tell
whatever.
you, like, the artist who really resonates with me, because I am an 80s baby as well. Okay, so I was in junior high school when Jay-Z's Reasonable Doubt came out.
Ooh, okay.
So, like, listening to him at that, and I had a friend who lived across the street from me. He was a guy, he was from Brooklyn, but he would hang out in Brooklyn because that's where he grew up, but he lived across the street in Rosedale. Okay. And he brought me the CD. He's like, you gotta listen to this guy. It wasn't even a CD, it was a cassette.
It was a cassette, I was about to say. It wasn't no CDs back then.
It was a cassette. He's like, you gotta listen to this guy. So, like, I was introduced to Jay-Z at that time, and something about his music, like, I wasn't in the street, so I didn't really get like all of it, but it was like empowering somehow. Like it was giving hope. It was giving, just like stuff I never really heard before. Yeah. So that I always think about as pushing me to want to be great, to just like, want more. I wasn't trying to be no hustler, nothing like that at all.
Well, you're a hustler now.
In a sense. Yeah. But I just wanted to be great. And I found myself always sort of like pushing myself to do more and to do better. So that's amazing. You're the second person to say Jay-Z. Yeah. So far. Yeah. I got some Nas. I got some Coogee rap. I got some interesting ones. Jay-Z's you got 2 for 2 so far. Yeah. So I'm not a fan of many people, but I'm a fan of him, and I'm a fan of Beyonce, and I think it's their work ethic and their grind. Like they're unapologetic about going for what's theirs, and that's what I respect. That's what's up. Yeah. How can they get in contact with Ambitious Legacy? Yeah. So our website, theambitiouslegacyfirm.com. If you're looking for me, you could go to SabineThePurposeLawyer.com, or you could find me on Instagram or my other social media platforms as Sabine the Purpose Lawyer. And my YouTube channel. Oh, and the YouTube. Make sure you check out the podcast. Yes, check out my podcast. Again, it's Sabine the Purpose Lawyer on YouTube as well. And you'll find the Ambitious Legacy podcast. Dope. Yeah. Make sure you subscribe, hit the notification button. This is dope.
This is dope. I've been waiting for this one for a while. You answered a million questions for me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. No problem.
And
Thank you for having me.
We're wrapping it up. Thanks for coming. That was nice.